Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, but today we are continuing with the 100 Years of Movie series. This time we are talking about the 1940s, and I have my good friend Daniel Epler from the Cobwebs, both podcast and for the YouTube channel too. So Daniel, how are you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. I've dusted off my own cobwebs to be presentable and to come on here and talk to you about the 1940s, which is a decade that I really loved living through it. I'm actually a lot older than I look, but I have a lot of personal experience with the 1940s, so I feel I'm prepared for this.
Yeah, I was wondering why you had put your hat and your pretty much your Bogart I guess get up. Where is it at? Is it just in the closet? Is that what?
So do you call a suit a Bogart getup?
Oh, I just couldn't think of the words at the moment. It's been a long day.
Well, yeah, this is the decade where all men are wearing suits. And I do love movies from this decade, but I watch them and I just think, how can you do that every day, all the time? Just wear suits constantly. I don't know. If I have to wear slacks to work, I'm like, ugh, what a drag.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like we've definitely dressed down as a society. And for this time period, it's very interesting to see how a lot of people just did their daily routine and how much work and how much more, I guess, clothing they put on.
Yeah, I think it's a positive change. I know some people look at pictures of Cary Grant or whatever, and they say man, why don't men look this good anymore? And one, no, we're never going to look as good as Cary Grant, no matter what we wear. And two, that's just a lot of trouble. And that's a lot of clothes to wear, especially in the summer. And I love t-shirts.
Summer. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's the thing I was thinking is it's very hot where I'm at because the humidity is just crazy. And I'm good not going to the tailor or to the laundromat to iron my suit. Or I mean, obviously you could iron your suits in your home, but I don't have time for that. So
yeah, but they did have time for that because they didn't have HBO Max and the Criterion channel and stuff. So that takes up a lot of our time, and so it should. It's important.
As it should, yes. And also the people who are watching this, if any of the films that we mentioned, any of the physical releases, there are some that are available on these streaming services and other streaming services. So we will mention that just ahead of time. So if you don't have the physical release or don't have the money to buy these films, then they're still probably on the streaming service. Some of them probably won't be, so you might have to hunt for them if you're curious. But yeah, I just wanted to give a heads up to people watching.
Yeah, that's a good call. From my three main picks, two of them are on HBO Max and one is on the Criterion channel, so they're all streamable.
And I think I have three on the Criterion channel. One, this is going to give stuff away. One on the Disney Plus channel, and then I don't know about another one, but I'm sure it's streaming somewhere, probably Amazon Prime or something. But anyway, we're going to get into our picks a little bit later. But first, let's do a little bit, talk about 1940s just in general. What do you think about the decade in general, buddy?
So my take on the 1940s is of all of the classic film eras, all those decades, I think the 1940s is actually the most timeless. And I think it's probably aged the best. It's not maybe necessarily as timeless in content as the 1930s is, because the 1930s has the pre-code era where there's not as much censorship. And so there's more innuendo. There's more frank. Wow. I worry that he might.
There's Poe.
This is my cat.
Yeah.
So the 1930s, there's less censorship. So there's just a lot more frank discussion about the facts of life. And the 1940s doesn't have that. But the 1940s, especially on a visual level, I think the fashions are far less dated than the 1930s or even this 1970s or such. Yeah, sure, people wear suits a lot of times, but people still wear suits today. I think the acting style has aged very well. If you look at the 1930s, and I love the 30s, but the acting style is more dated than, say, the 1940s, where there's a lot more contemporary performances. So there's a lot more naturalistic acting, there's a lot of stylized dialogue, but there's more naturalistic dialogue. And I just think the 1940s is a very timeless era in a lot of ways. And I think there's so many great movies. For me, there's kind of two genres that really dominate the 1940s as far as the movies that I love, and it's noir and comedy. And I think the 1940s was an amazing, amazing decade for noir films and comedy films. Great movies in other genres too, but those are my two focuses with the decade. So yeah, I think probably like, I mean, the 40s might be one of my two favorite decades of film. Like it's probably the 40s and the 80s, and then maybe the 30s would be like in there somewhere too. But yeah, one of my favorite decades of film, absolutely. And I'm really honored that you asked me to come on here, because if you gave me you didn't like you asked me, hey, will you do the 1940s? But if you just gave me the choice, I would have picked the 1940s. And you know me, so you probably knew I would have.
Yeah, and that's the reason, like I said, that I chose you for the 1940s, because I think I know your love of it, and I know your love of noir and comedies, especially coming from at least the 30s. We saw a lot of those really slapstick and screwball comedies kind of come more into the 40s as well, and continue on in that way, which I think is fantastic. And there's even some comedies in like Universal Studios, which actually is an honorable mention. I'll mention a little bit in a second. But there's all those types. You're seeing a continuation of like the Universal monster films. I mean, they're more B movies at this point. With most of the lineup really kind of solidified in the early 40s, maybe some of the new cast and characters, but like the remaining rest of the 40s, you would see like the third or fourth or fifth or sixth film of a specific thing, right? And so, phone call. Anyway, with that being said, like you also get noirs, right? Which a lot of the 1930s would have a bunch of gangster films, like Scarface and whatnot. That would be, continued on and elaborated more with the camera and the stylized notion of these types of films. And so you'd have films that would really solidify in the 40s and continue in the 50s as well, kind of when it tapered out as a genre in a whole, and then eventually come back as a neo-noir back in like the 70s and 80s, right? So I really like the 40s too, and it was very tough to pick some of my favorite films from this decade, but I was able to do it. So what about you?
Oh, it was for my three picks, like it's not necessarily like my top three films of the decade, because I don't know what my top three films of the decade would be. One of them is maybe my favorite movie of the decade, like maybe, and the other two are actually recent discoveries that I saw fairly recently, so they're kind of fresh in my brain. But if I made a top three, they wouldn't be far off. Like these are two of my favorite movies of this decade, undoubtedly. And it doesn't matter that I saw them fairly recently. So that's kind of how I picked mine. And then for my honorable mentions, I just went through all my Blu-ray DVD shelves and just, pick movies off. And it's kind of a tall stack, but I don't think it's going to take too long to talk through, because I separated them into categories. So I'll just kind of go like category at a time. You know what I mean?
That works. Also, I have a quick challenge actually to do in front of you and on the camera, which I didn't realize that I did this because I thought I had solidified what this was prior to. This is the third video in this series. But if you remember, if anyone watches this and saw the first video with my roommate Palmer, we talked about 5 films each. And then with Raquel, we talked about 3 films each. And so what I'm challenging you to do is maybe take 2 from that honorable mentions. That way we can at least get 5. If you can do that off camera, as before you're talking about your honorable mentions.
So take 2 honorable mentions to not be honorable mentions anymore and to be picks.
They're going to be picks, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. I can do that.
So as I'm doing this live for the people, I mean, obviously this is a recorded video for people to watch at home, but I'm making this clear now, like going forward, there's going to be 5 films each. That way there can be 10 picks, and that would make more sense, I think.
Yeah, that sounds good
for a lot of people. So, but luckily Raquel, I don't know why, but she had a lot of choices other than the 3 that she chose, and so that was perfectly fine. So I'm glad that she had plenty of honorable mentions to cover that end.
Yeah, and I just gotta tell you, I loved that video. I enjoyed it so much. Raquel is who I want to be when I grow up. Basically, her knowledge that's where I want to be. Like her knowledge is amazing, and I am not there yet. But yeah, that was an awesome video. Loved it.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that conversation having with her, and yeah, she's a wealth of knowledge and really good friend. So I'm happy that I was able to share that with everybody else as well. So, are you ready to do some honorable mentions from the 40s?
Yeah, man, I'm ready.
All right, let's see what your first is, or your first bunch.
Okay, so just a couple of noirs here. I have noir in my actual picks, but I Wake Up Screaming is a movie that I've talked to you about before because I talked about it on a Kino Lorber episode of Cobwebs that we did together, where we just picked Kino Lorber favorites. And this is a very early noir. It's 1941, which is very early for the genre. But it's a terrific noir. It's dark, but it's like not as dark as the genre would get a little bit later. But it's man wrongfully accused. There's a murder. A lot of it's told in flashback. It's very classic noir, has a very satisfying ending. And I just want to throw out Double Indemnity. It's not a pick because it's one of the biggest movies of this decade, and I just want to go with at least slightly more obscure movies for my picks. But one of my very favorite noirs of all time.
Great one.
So those 44? Are just a couple of those are a couple of honorable mention noirs.
Well, excellent. I guess since we're talking noir, I suppose my honorable mention, I'll go talk about one of the biggest ones, and it even has big in its name, The Big Sleep. Bogart and Bacall right here. So the Howard Hawks film, this is, I would say this and To Have and Have Not are probably like the biggest Bogart and Bacall films, but obviously The Big Sleep, it's the Philip Marlowe character that's been played over and over again in various iterations, like, Robert Mitchum would do it. A lot of people would do it in different forms, right? So like one of our best friends, Chris, he really loves a particular film that, why am I blanking on it? It's literally
The
right
Long
there.
Goodbye.
The Long Goodbye with
Elliot Gould.
Elliot Gould, okay. And like his face is right there. And then eventually this would be like Spike in, Cowboy Bebop. But anyway.
That's true.
Yeah, it all fits. But The Big Sleep, great film from 1946. And also 1945. There's like two versions of this film. And it has both on this particular Warner Archive release. But it's a really messy noir because it's kind of all over the place. But it's so timeless and it has so many great scenes. And yeah, if anyone hasn't seen any of the Bogart and Bacall films, certainly do yourself a favor, watch all of them. But I would, if I had to choose one, The Big Sleep would be the one that I would choose for the noirs. What about your next bunch of films?
Well, I love The Big Sleep, so that was a really, really great choice. I love all those Bogart Bacall movies. Highly recommend them all. Let's see. Let's talk about a little bit of comedy. Clooney Brown is a fairly recent discovery of mine. It is an Ernst Lubitsch movie. This is the year of Lubitsch for my personal watching. I've been going through Lubitsch's movies, burning through them pretty quickly. I think I've watched like 10 at this point, but
wow.
This is one of my very, very favorites. It's a terrific comedy about a young woman named Clooney Brown who, like, she doesn't really fit in because she's that maybe it's a little bit of a silly term, but she's basically a tomboy and she really enjoys plumbing and she likes to fix sinks and stuff like that. And people think she's very strange. Her uncle thinks she's too strange and he sends her away to work at this rich family's house as a maid. And she does, but she meets a man named Adam Belinsky. He's played by Charles Boyer, and he is also quirky and doesn't really fit in. And he's there like as a friend of the rich family, but he really likes Clooney Brown more than anybody, and they really bond. And it's just a terrific, terrific romantic comedy. I love it. And as far as another comedy, this is like Double Indemnity, one of the biggest movies of the decade that I just want to mention is His Girl Friday. Which is one of the best movies ever made. I think it is rapid fire dialogue comedy. Technically, it is a romantic comedy because it does have romance in it, but it's kind of more about the newspaper business more than anything. Mm-hmm. So it's a great newspaper business comedy. And it's Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell. If you haven't seen it, like, this is a movie that anyone will like. I don't care if you like old movies. If you like classic film, you'll like this movie. It's just perfect.
And it has a double feature, right? In that particular release.
Yeah, on the Criterion, it has the front page, which this is technically a remake. Some people don't know that. I've not actually seen the front page, so I do need to watch that eventually.
I've seen them both, but yeah, His Girl Friday is timeless, and I would have to agree that anyone would like it, no matter if you don't like this time period or not. Speaking of comedies, I actually have one that is in a set that I have actually right behind me, the Universal Classic Monsters set. I actually have the Frankenstein one right in front of me. I'm picking Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein from 1948. It's definitely the best Abbott and Costello meet said Universal monster character, because it was the first and is the one that had probably the most attention. I mean, don't quote me, but I'm sure they wrote this and made this a little bit better, because they had like Bela Lugosi, Lon Chaney Jr.'s in it as well. And so you have the Wolfman and Dracula both, and then Frankenstein's monsters in it, and even an invisible character, if you will, at the very end of the film. But yeah, it's just a really, really great film. It's really funny, and if you really like slapstick comedy, Abbott and Costello, and a lot of the duo related things that you would see during this time period. Obviously, this was based a lot on like Laurel and Hardy. That's what Abbott and Costello kind of piggybacked on. But great film, and the Abbott and Costello films. I'm really excited to dive more into the Abbott and Costello films, because I have that from Shout Factory. But if you want to watch one that's related to the Universal monsters and is funny and used very well, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein from 1948.
Yeah, it is my hot take that is the best horror comedy ever made. I think for me, that's the best in the entire genre. I love that film. It was a movie that, like, when I was a kid, I knew I loved it, but like I didn't know what a perfect movie it was. And then, as I watched it as an adult, like a few times, I've seen it as an adult many times, I'm like, no, it's a masterpiece. Like, I think it is. Like, it's a silly comedy, which usually silly comedies don't get called masterpieces very often, but no, it's a perfect movie. Pretty much every laugh hits. All the monsters are portrayed perfectly. Abbott and Costello's performances are fantastic comedy performances. And comedy doesn't get the credit for performance as much as drama does, which I think is unfair, because like Abbott and Costello are brilliant in that movie. So yeah, I love that film. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, so I definitely had to pick a comedy in that honorable mentions. But what about next? What's your next honorable mention?
Okay, let me talk about horror. So my Universal Monsters pick is The Wolfman. Of this entire decade, this movie has been in my life the longest, and it's the movie that's been important to me the longest. And honestly, it is in contention for my favorite movie of the whole decade. It's not a pick, because I've podcasted on this movie twice. I did an episode of Cobwebs on it with our friend Chris Hurtado, and I guested on an episode of The Terror Table talking about this movie. So I talked about this movie a lot, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's one of my favorite movies ever made. It's my favorite Universal Monsters movie. Lon Chaney Jr. he's such a sympathetic protagonist, but then he's also the monster. That's one reason that I love it so much. Is I think the Universal Monsters, as much as I love the movies, and I have a Universal Monsters cup right here that I'm currently drinking out of. I'm just drinking water. I'm not like our friend Chris Hurtado. I'm not drinking a vodka Red Bull, nor have I ever. But where was I? Oh, I think the Universal Monsters has a bit of a problem with protagonists. They have great monsters. They often don't have great good guys. And that's one reason.
Humanized. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one reason that I like it's not the only reason, but it's one reason I prefer Hammer. Is I think Hammer is better with protagonists than Universal Monsters is. But this one fixes that problem, because the monster is the protagonist. So
yes,
they're both great. And then, are you going to talk about Val Lewton?
I am not going to talk about Val Lewton, but I definitely would like to hear more about Val Lewton.
Okay, then I have to give honorable mention to Val Lewton. So I have the DVD collection of his 9 horror movies. For anyone who doesn't know, Val Lewton was a producer. He was not a director. He was a producer in the 1940s who he was really an auteur producer who made monster movies. Sort of. He was basically given titles by RKO, and they were like, okay, you're going to make a horror movie called Cat People. What is Cat People about? They don't care. Hey, Val, you have to make a movie called Cat People. We don't care what it's about. We don't care what it is. Just go do it. So basically, he used that to make these incredibly interesting and unique horror films that are unlike anything else. These are not like the Universal Monsters movies. They're very moody, slow, admittedly, very atmospheric, and they have very little in terms of traditional monster horror. Often nothing. There's often you don't see any kind of monster. It's all about dread and terror. And I like his movies a lot. I haven't burned my way through this entire box yet. By the way, I'm very proud that I have this DVD box set. Unfortunately, there is no Blu-ray box set of Val Lewton. They're slowly releasing all the films between Criterion, Screen Factory, and Warner Archive.
I have the Blu-ray from Criterion.
So actually maybe like a little less than half, or a half or a little less than half are on Blu-ray so far, but I have the DVD collection. And what I really want to give honorable mention to is what's included on this particular disc, I Walked with a Zombie, which is that's my favorite Val Lewton movie personally, because I like the characters the best. I really just adore the characters in this movie. They're so likable, and I love just listening to them hang out and talk, but also it's legitimately creepy. But I also want to give love to The Body Snatcher, starring Boris Karloff. I think Boris Karloff's best work is in Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. I know that's a basic answer, but I think that's his best performance. But besides those, I think it's The Body Snatcher. He is great in this movie. It's directed by Robert Wise, who's a director that I feel like cinephiles don't talk about enough because he's not an auteur and he's a journeyman. But you give Robert Wise a script, doesn't matter the genre, he's probably going to make a better movie than almost anyone else can. I mean, I've got my giant West Side Story box right back there. He made West Side Story, which is maybe the best musical ever made. And he made a horror movie called The Body Snatcher, and it's super creepy, super dark. It is macabre as hell. And also has Bela Lugosi in a small role. It's great. So that's just my great big honorable mention to Val Lewton. A big fan of his movies. Some people don't think the 1940s is a great decade for horror, and I sort of get it, but there are a lot of great Universal monsters in the 40s, and you got the Val Lewton movies in the 40s too. So big fan.
Yeah, I am too. I've only seen Cat People, and recently too, if you recall.
Oh, okay.
And I fell in love with it. Yeah, you're right about the atmosphere. It definitely feels almost like a noir, at least in the photography and how the set design of everything. But yeah, I love the idea of dread and not really seeing the monster, if you will, or seeing the actual terror that's taking place. That stuff actually just does freak me out, and I think that actually makes it that's better horror for me, at least. And obviously it just depends on what type of horror that I want to watch, because obviously each different horror speaks to a different way of however you're feeling at the time. So but yes, great pick. I need to watch more Val Lewton, that's for sure.
I think you'll really love The Body Snatcher, and I think you'll love Curse of the Cat People, because that Curse of the Cat People doesn't feel like a horror movie. It kind of feels like a Guillermo del Toro movie in a way. Okay. I think you would really like that movie a lot.
And I do love del Toro. But moving away from Val Lewton to we're actually going to the later part of the decade, actually, but they've done a lot of stuff in the 40s and some in the 50s as well. But I'm actually talking about a duo from England, Michael Powell and Emrick Pressberger, The Red Shoes. Now I didn't pick this because it's definitely one of the biggest named movies of this time period, and Black Narcissus is also during this time period. And I haven't seen all of Powell and Pressburger's work, but The Red Shoes is the one that really just kind of captured my attention. It's a gorgeous film. It's tragic as well. It's pretty enchanting, just the way that everything is set up, like the costume design, the dances, of course. It's an incredible film. And if you haven't seen The Red Shoes, you can watch it on the Criterion channel, but also this is a really gorgeous release from Criterion. And I would highly recommend watching this, and also just watch more Pressburger and Powell, because they're just fantastic. I would also say A Matter of Life and Death, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Watch those films because they're just incredible.
I'm so relieved this isn't an official pick, because when you asked me to do this, I thought, well, I have to watch The Red Shoes, because if I'm remembering right, I think you did a top 10 movies in the Criterion Collection video, and I believe you put Red Shoes at the top. So I was like, I have to watch Red Shoes, and I didn't get around to it. Like I've had so much podcasting lately. I've just not, and my work life has slightly got day job life has gotten a bit busier. I just haven't had the time, but I'm ashamed. I need to watch that movie.
I mean, but the hard work, if you watch this, you'll understand what hard work looks like. You'll see what it really does to people.
I don't know what hard work is like.
Nobody does. I mean, we're just sitting here making videos about movies and stuff, right?
That's all I do. Yeah,
that's all we do, right? But anyway, yeah. So there's that. Do you have any other honorable mentions, or?
I will just quickly. You called out Bogie and Bacall. I'll just quickly call it To Have and Have Not, which is my favorite Bogie and Bacall movie. It's very much a Casablanca rip. It's very obvious that they were like, Oh, Casablanca was popular. Get that Bogart guy and do that again.
Do it again, Bogart.
It's similar in plot, but one thing I like about it, it's a lot lighter than Casablanca. Like Casablanca is the very serious, very dramatic version. And this is like Bogart's hanging out and like he's not worried about Ingrid Bergman. Like he's not really that lovesick. He's like, I'm just chilling. I'm doing my job. I'm flirting with this hot girl named Lauren Bacall. I go to this bar. I drink. I make people pay me the money that they owe me. And I don't know. Bogart's just chilling and he's having fun in this movie. So I really enjoy it because it's a light, really enjoyable watch. But it's not as good as Casablanca, but it is good enough that sometimes I'm like, do I like it better than Casablanca? I don't know, but it's
rewatchability.
Just really
I would say there's an argument there. Like you said, it's a little bit more lighthearted, so I can get that. Just really just mood dependent, and both of them are incredible. So that's how I view it as. I actually have one more honorable mention, and this actually is a little bit out. This is outside the United States, so. A lot of the films we've been talking about, like noirs and comedies, this is really coming from like Hollywood, and this is really like focused on the United States. But I definitely wanted, there's one pick that I have in my actual picks, but also in my honorable mentions. I did want to mention the Italian neorealistic movement that was coming out around this time period. So I'm talking about Rome Open City right here. There's actually a trilogy right here, the War trilogy from Rossellini, Paisan, and Germany Year Zero. So incredible. Well, I wouldn't say incredible might not be the right term. Incredibly tumultuous times in Europe, because obviously in the 40s, half of it is in war, right? And we didn't really talk much about how World War II was raging on as this is happening. Now, this film is actually shot in Germany during the war, and it was incredibly hush-hush from the people making the film. And so it's just that in itself is crazy enough to kind of see like what war really does on people. And it's like I said, it's neorealistic. So obviously the characters are fictionalized, but a lot of the things going on really did happen to a lot of the people who were involved, in these areas. And so in Rome Open City, this is the first film in this trilogy that really does showcase the horror and brutality of war and what it looks like, on a grand scale, but also with the mini histories, not mini histories, but like the histories of the people involved, right? So when we think of history, we always think of grand archical things. We don't really think of the individuals themselves who are involved with this. That's what movies can do, is they can see and show that there's individuals within these movements that we can, latch onto. We can seek the humanity from it, and I definitely highly recommend these films. It's incredible watches. It's hard to watch at the same time because, like I said, there's some realistic elements to it, but I think it's necessary, especially if you're a fan of history and a fan of international film as well.
Yeah, my 1940s knowledge is all Hollywood, I admit. Like I don't think I've seen any foreign films from 1940s. When was The Bicycle Thieves? Was that 50s? 48. Okay, so there we go. I've seen one foreign film from the 1940s.
Another Italian neorealistic film, just like the Roberto Rossellini's trilogy here.
Okay, right on.
So yeah, this was a big time for that, and we'll even talk about another country in my picks in a little bit. But
cool.
I think that's all for our honorable mentions, right?
Yeah, I'm good, man.
All right, so we are ready to pick our 5 favorite films from this decade. There's no particular order. Normally, what I do is I usually go in sequential order, so like when they came out. But I think for this go around, at least for my picks, I'm going to go backwards. So I'm going to go at the top of the 40s and go all the way down. So just for me, that's how I'm going to do it. But Daniel, you're free to share whatever you have, any thematic things. If you want to go in a year, that's perfectly fine. There's no particular order to this. But
okay,
what's your first?
Yeah, I don't think I have an order. So first I'm going to go through my 2 were honorable mentions, now our picks, and then I'll go to my like official 3 picks. So first of all, I'm going to go noir. I'm going to talk about Gun Crazy. So Gun Crazy for me is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. For me, this movie is like a living nightmare. So what it is about, it's about a guy played by John Dahl, who is fantastic in this movie. But it starts out with him as a kid, and he's not necessarily a bad kid, but he has this obsession with guns. And he wants a gun so bad that he breaks into a department store to steal one. So the movie kind of opens with him on trial. Anyway, we cut to him as an adult. He He's recently gotten out of the army, and he left the army because he said like, oh, it gets boring just teaching guys how to shoot, because he's an incredible marksman. Well, his buddies from back home, now that he's gone back to his hometown, they take him to sort of a carnival, and he goes into one of those tents where they're like, step right up and see the greatest shooter in the world. And it's Peggy Cummings, and she's an incredible markswoman. And they basically do this thing where it's like, oh, pay $50. And if you can beat her in a shooting contest, then you get to double your money. So he does that. And much to Peggy Cummings' shock, he beats her. But they're both incredible marksmen. And he ends up joining with the carnival to as like another exhibit of an incredible shooter. And but they end up falling in love. They run away and get married. And she is kind of an adrenaline junkie, basically. And he's not. He's a pretty chill guy, but
she's a little gun crazy.
She's gone crazy. She has such a hold on him, and he is so obsessively in love with her that she can kind of get him to do whatever she wants. And they end up going on this crime spree, and it becomes like a Bonnie and Clyde sort of thing. But it's not a fun crime spree. It's like realistically miserable, and just you feel his just despair over the fact that like this all happened so fast. I don't even know how I got into this, but now suddenly I'm one of the most wanted men in the country. And, there are a lot of noir films where the cops feel like this horrific presence who are an unstoppable force. And no matter what, the law is going to catch up to you. And that's how this movie feels. So like, I feel like if I were, this feels like a nightmare that I would have, where it's just like, I just made a few bad decisions and suddenly like, oh, my life is ruined. Like, unless somehow I can get into another country, like I'm absolutely going to go to jail for the rest of my life.
Or just die in a gunfire. That's probably what, I mean, I haven't seen the film, but I haven't.
Oh, okay.
So I have it in that recent Warner Archive sale, but I'm definitely wanting to watch it. So
yeah, I love the movie. It's brilliantly well done. It has one robbery sequence that is like a really, really long take, and it is a beautiful, beautiful sequence. But also like Peggy Cummings is like she's not all evil, and they have some legitimately romantic moments here and there, but she is definitely a horrible influence on him. But Gun Crazy is super intense. It is a great little noir film, and I highly recommend it. Love that one.
Excellent choice.
Thank you.
For mine, my first pick, it's actually one of Hitchcock's lesser known films. And when I say lesser known films, it's not like it's less talked about. We're talking about like Vertigo or Psycho, The Birds. I mean, even Rear Window, which is a 40s film. But the film that I actually like the most from this time period is one with Jimmy Stewart. It also has Farley Granger in it and John Dahl as well, and Joan Chandler. But I'm talking about Rope. Rope is from 1948. It's based on a play. That play is adapted by Patrick Hamilton that came out, I think, in 29. It was adapted by Hume Cronin with a screenplay by Arthur Lawrence. And this is like a one setting, like one scene, one setting, and like just really dialogue driven. It's mainly Farley Granger and John Dahl, or Philip and Brandon, and they're like rich, college-aged, educated folk who are kind of just testing things. And at the very, very beginning of the film, they both commit a murder. They literally have a rope and they're strangling one of their classmates, and they kill him. And then they're about to have a dinner and inviting all of their friends and family. And they're going to hide the body in this cupboard, and they're going to have this setup where all the drinks and all their food is like on top of the table. And so more or less the adrenaline from Philip and Brandon's character, they want to get caught, or in some kind of regard, like let's see if anyone catches on. So with that, Rupert, which is played by Jimmy Stewart, he is their friend who is the one who's probably the wisest. And when I say like definitely most suspicious of what, these two guys are up to. And you kind of just see this cat and mouse back and forth game this entire movie. And it's just really, really wonderful. And I am a huge fan of films like 12 Angry Men, or more recent years Carnage, or something like Rope. I love where it's one setting and you just have to focus and laser in on how good the dialogue is and how back and forth things are going on and people are discovering that. But Rope is a fantastic Hitchcock film. Now, I will say the motivation for killing their classmate is pretty weak, I would say, but also at the same time, you kind of understand because they're rich, college-age boys. They kind of have this superiority complex about them, and they think they're better than everybody else, and so they're wanting to take on that Nietzsche Ubermensch, a Superman kind of take, or De Quincey's take on trying to be superior in like art of killing. And there's an art to it. There's an art to killing people, and it's perfectly fine and suitable to kill inferior beings, is what kind of spurs these two to do this. And so, which, like I said, opening shot, you see the death. So I'm not giving anything away. It's just like, are they going to get caught? And as Hitchcock does, that's what the suspense is. The thrill is there, and it's a fantastic film. Have you seen Rope?
I have. It's been a long time. Like, I think I was probably like a teenager the last time I saw it. So it is one that I've been meaning to rewatch. My memory is that they do the murder just to try it, just because they want the experience of murder and want to see what it's like, right?
Yeah. So there's a rush to that, and then also like I said, they have this idea that they're superior to everybody, and they can just kill if they want to. So it's for a rush and for that, because it's exciting to kill somebody. So there's that.
Is that your favorite Hitchcock movie?
It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
Rebecca, which I didn't mention, just because it's another one that's like really highly touted.
I talked about it last time one time I was on your show, and I talked about Rebecca, so that's one reason I left it off.
So damn good. But yeah, like Rebecca, that, Rear Window, those are like probably my three favorite. They're all R's, I just realized. Those are my favorites of the 40s. And then, I feel like every decade of Hitchcock, I have like three favorites. But those, for the 40s, those are the three that I like the most: Rebecca, Rear Window, and Rope.
Yeah.
But that's my first pick. What about your second?
All right, so now we start on the Criterions, and we never stop because all the rest of my picks are Criterions for some reason.
I have a few myself.
I'm going to talk about The Uninvited.
Excellent.
I'm not going to talk a ton about the plot of this movie, because what you need to know is this is a haunted house movie. It is it's a horror movie that maybe gets overlooked in this decade a little bit too much, because it's not a Universal Monsters movie, and it's not a Val Lewton movie. So it's not in one of those really famous categories. It's pretty on its own. But one reason that this movie is very historically significant, is it's one of the first ghost movies to take ghosts seriously. It's 1944. It was just a few years ago that The Ghost Breakers came out with Bob Hope and Paula Goddard, which is ghosts are a big joke. And in most ghost movies up to this point, ghosts are always used like as a farce by people to achieve some sort of crime, like in order to scare someone away so that you can receive the inheritance or something like that.
It's like the Scooby-Doo plot that would be later on. It's like that. Yeah,
exactly. So this one is significant because ghosts are not a joke. They are real. And so this kind of kicked that off in Hollywood. And it is a delightful horror movie, partly because it's starring Ray Milland and Chris Hurtado would kill me for forgetting the actress's name. The lead actress is not back. Oh, nope. Okay. Anyway, she's great. I think her name is Jane something, but a lot of it feels like kind of a romantic comedy with Ray Milland and this actress. And it's like a legitimately good romance movie, and they're really adorable. So it's kind of an adorable horror movie. I like horror movies that I feel like I can call that. But it's got legitimately spooky sequences in it, and it's got a pretty impactful ending with like a great twist and pretty cool ghost stuff. Yeah, so I love The Uninvited. I did talk about it on Cobwebs once, again with Chris Hurtado. He loves this movie, and I think this movie is terrific.
It's actually aptly named because that kid breaks in to your house constantly. So The Uninvited actually works perfectly for that, for Chris Hurtado. Excellent choice. I have that Criterion as well. It's definitely one of my favorites in the collection. At least definitely it's like that, and like Carnival of Lost Souls, where it's like where are these cool like underground horror films, like or at least ones that aren't really like talked about too much. Which I'm glad that they're touted like that.
The ones that are not in a famous category, like Val Lewton or Vincent Price or Hammer.
Or Universal,
these movies are
Universal,
on their own.
yeah. Mm-hmm,
yeah,
exactly. All right, so for my next pick is my noir choice. It's a weird one too as a noir, but it's from 1946. It's directed by Charles Vidor, and it's got one of the most legendary performances of all time. It's probably been my favorite noir now, and I've watched it about 3 times now, and I only got it last year. I'm talking about Gilda right here with Rita Hayworth. I love that bright pink little slipcover from
awesome.
Criterion. But yes, Gilda is fantastic. So Rita Hayworth plays Gilda. We also have Glenn Ford as our main character, our main protagonist, I guess. Johnny Farrell is his name. We also have George McCready as Ballin Munson, who is the casino owner. But just kind of just a small synopsis, because I don't want to give anything away, because it's a noir, right? So there's twists and turns. But we have Johnny Farrell. So like I said, Glenn Ford, his character. He's a gambler. He goes into this casino. He pretty much cheats them out of money and gets hired on from Ballin Munson, who catches on to him. And he's like, you know what? You get out of this by being the casino manager. You can run the casino. You work for me, right? And then not too long after, Gilda shows up, is like now the new wife of Munson. And actually, Gilda and Johnny know each other, and they hate that they see each other. And so you kind of see why they hate each other and where that the history kind of comes into play. And that's probably where I'll stop. But yes, it's really great. Like I said, this is a legendary performance from Rita Hayworth. Obviously, are you Rita, like or Gilda, are you decent? That line is just incredible, and it's just one of those things you wouldn't expect to hear in 1946, because this is a very sexualized noir. Not to say like that's the sell. It's just like that's just one of the things they're like, wow, you just
it's kind of the sell.
It's kind of the sell. But also at the same time, like that gorgeous dress she wears by Jean Lewis. His costume design is just immaculate in this film. It's just a very I love how Rita Hayworth's character just kind of toys with everybody and just messes with everybody, and really gets away with it because that's who Gilda is. And I really love this movie, and I just think this is definitely one of the like most rewatchable noirs, because I mean obviously noirs, if you watch it once, you usually kind of get what's going to happen, right? Obviously some of them, like the Bogart and Bacall ones, are fun to rewatch. But yeah, Gilda is definitely one of my favorite ones to rewatch. Like I said, I've seen it 3 times. I just bought this last year. So this is my choice for 1946.
Great one. I love Gilda. I watched it last year because Criterion Channel put up a Rita Hayworth collection, and I just decided I'm going to watch all of them. So I did. And Gilda, I think it was my favorite, or at least very close to my favorite. I for a long time had a bias against Glenn Ford. And my bias was he's a super safe, conservative, boring guy. Mm-hmm. And the reason I had this bias is because 1, he's Pa Kent in Superman. So I had seen him in that. And 2, like he gets name dropped sometimes in the Andy Griffith Show, which I grew up with because of my family. And I have a little bit of I don't have the kindest feelings towards the Andy Griffith Show anymore. But once I finally started watching Glenn Ford movies, he's like the darkest male actor of his era. Like in Gilda, he's legitimately scary at times. He's one of the most like morally bankrupt, angry, vicious male protagonists in a 1940s movie. And I love him in that movie. Love Rita. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Rita Hayworth, and that movie is a wonderful showcase for her. Other great Rita Hayworth noir, The Lady from Shanghai, which I believe is also the 1940s. Yeah. That's another one people should check out.
I was going to say, if you're talking about Glenn Ford again, I'm talking about a 50s movie though, that I wanted to bring up for a second. Speaking of meanness, the Big Heat. If you haven't seen The Big Heat, people need to watch this movie. This is the indicator one, but Twilight Time put it out. It's out of print, hard to get, especially in the States, but you need to watch like a really mean-spirited noir with Glenn Ford. Big Heat. Seriously, it's
sneak peek. The Big Heat is coming up on Cobwebs in about a couple of months, so we'll have an episode on that before too long.
Movie is incredible. Coffee pot. That's all I got to say. But anyway, what is your next choice?
Okay, my next choice is a comedy And it is just one of the smartest, funniest comedies I've ever seen, any decade. I don't care what decade. It is To Be or Not to Be, which is an Ernst Lubitsch movie. I think it is my favorite Ernst Lubitsch movie. I love this cover. It's with the skull over the Nazi. It's a comedy about Nazis, but the Nazis are not the main characters. They are the bad guys. So what this movie is about, they're the bad guys.
Oh, right.
It is about a theatrical troupe in Poland in the 1940s. And they're putting on Hamlet, and Jack Benny is the lead actor of this troupe and the lead actor of the movie. And he's like putting on his to be or not to be speech and whatever. But anyway, what happens to Poland in the 1940s? They get invaded by the Nazis. So then the country is terrible. They're all miserable. They're not able to do their theatrical troupe anymore. And they really just want the Nazis out. Well, Carol Lombard is in this movie, by the way, with Jack Benny. I'm not going to get into too many specifics, but basically they have the opportunity to stop this Nazi scientist from delivering a list of the Polish rebels' names to the Nazis. So Jack Benny ends up impersonating the Nazi officer that he's supposed to turn it into. And it is this hilarious scene because Jack Benny is terrible at it. And the interaction goes very, very badly. But then they end up getting, I won't say how, but they end up getting that Nazi scientist out of the way. And now Jack Benny impersonates that Nazi scientist and goes to the Nazi officer that he was impersonating the first time. And in order to, well, I won't get into too many spoilers, but basically he has to impersonate the Nazi scientist. And now it's basically the same scene happens again, but this time Jack Benny is the scientist and not the Nazi officer. And it goes much better because it's like he's had a rehearsal and it's like he knows what to say. And it is just one of the smartest screenplay moments. Like it's all the callbacks to the previous scene. It's so funny. This is a hysterical movie, but it's very like, you just love the characters and you just want them to get out of this okay, because this is a comedy that's also intense. Because there's Nazis and it's scary. One funny thing about Ernst Lubitsch movies I notice is they rarely star male actors I'm familiar with. It's a lot of guys I don't really know. Like I didn't really know Jack Benny. And usually my first reaction to the male actor is, really? This is our lead? This guy? Like, why didn't you get Cary Grant or something? But by the end of the movie, like I always love his leading actors. Like they're always great. And I love Jack Benny in this movie. He is hysterically funny. And this is actually Carol Lombard's last movie. She passed away the very year that this movie came out. So yeah, this is, I checked this out for the first time this year. It is on HBO Max. I watched it on HBO Max. I loved it so much. I bought the Criterion disc. So yeah, that's To Be or Not to Be from 1942. I love it with all my heart. It's awesome.
I've been having that in and out of my shopping cart for the longest time. So I think once we hit the summer and we have a 50% off sale, that's definitely getting in there because I really want to get more into Ernst's movies. I actually only have early ones from Eureka. I have Lubitsch and Berlin. So I have these early films right here from Eureka.
Which movies are on there?
I Don't Want to Be a Man from 1918, The Doll from 1919, The Oyster Princess from 1919, Sumaran from 1920, Anna Boleyn from 1920, and The Mountain Cat from 1921.
That's awesome. I haven't seen his silent movies, but I didn't actually know there was a physical release for them. So that is fantastic.
Fairy tales, melodramas, and sex comedies. So there it is.
That's what he does. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for those, and I need to get more into his 30s and 40s works too. So, excellent pick. I'm wanting to, like I said, that cover is you can't not see that cover and smile. I guess that's kind of where that farcical nonsense comes over the Nazis. So. We're gonna get a little bit more serious, a little bit more. Speaking of fairy tales, I just mentioned fairy tales. We're actually going to go to France to 1946. This is one of my favorite films of all time. It's actually my favorite adaptation of this tale, and I grew up with this tale. It eventually became a Disney tale. I'm talking about Jean Cocteau's La Belle et la Bête, or The Beauty and the Beast. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I remember watching this about 4 or 5 years ago for the first time. I believe I talked about it on my channel. when I first got it. And I was just kind of blown away by it. Because this is definitely one of the early French films that I was aware of. I've seen Children of Paradise, which is another thing that people should watch if you haven't seen Children of Paradise. Incredible epic by Michael Carn, but also things like Rules of the Game. So we're talking about Jean Renoir, really great 30s film. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the French films during this time. I actually am very unaware of the French New Wave, which is a lot of people who are probably watching this know a lot more about. But I really love 40s French films, 30s and 40s French films. But anyway, La Belle et la Bête. We have Jean Marais as the Beast, and also Abbott, who is pretty much our Gaston character. He plays, both of them. So you'll get that if you watch the movie. And Josette Day plays Belle. And I love this movie for so many reasons, but it's mainly just how enchanting this film is. It's realistic in the sense that this is post World War II, and so away from the creature, so away from the beast. If you're outside the garden at his castle in that area, you have this impoverished town, right, the French countryside. That's kind of showing like the harsh realities of war has just ravaged France, right? And so you get
it's a
little bit
provincial town.
Yeah, and so you get that. And then there's that fantastical side where you're in the Beast's garden. You're, kind of the lakeside near the river and all those areas. And that's where the fantasy comes in. But it's also in the setting of like the castle itself, because the set design is just incredible. There's like human hands that are like holding all the torches.
I love those.
All of the like the faces that are by the fire pit that just move. With everything, it's just incredibly set up and well designed, and it's just the lighting is also something where like it plays with shadow quite a bit and with smoke, right? So like every time you see the Beast, he's like his body's like smoking, like there's almost like a dry ice effect that's coming off of him, and it looks very surreal, like you're in a dream. And it's an austere movie. That's what I'd probably say is the best way to do it. But the art direction, the costume, the music is also incredible in this film too. It's very eerie, but also enchanting. But yeah, if you haven't seen almost everybody's probably seen the 90s Beauty and the Beast Disney movie, which I love, by the way. I enjoy that film. But I would just say this is the best adaptation of the Beauty and the Beast. And it's definitely the French one from 1946. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I believe it's on the Criterion channel. But I have the Criterion right here. It's one of my first Criterions, and it's definitely one of my favorites. So
I have seen that movie, and now you've reminded me there's another foreign film from the 40s I've seen. Yeah, that movie is very interesting. And the ways that the director figures out to make the Beast Castle feel otherworldly and feel magical are so interesting, because like, okay, so you need to create a magical world, but it's the 1940s. You're very limited on special effects. Like, what do you do? And this guy's so smart that like, you're like the hands coming out of the walls and the faces, like he just comes up with these incredibly creative things to make it feel like you've literally stepped into another reality, which is really, really cool. I admit I do prefer the 1990s version. Ultimately, it's my favorite Disney movie. One of my issues with that French one, it's so silly, but I hate the Beast's voice. He kind of sounds like this. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I miss that like super deep voice of the 1990s Disney version, I admit. But that is a very cool movie.
It's all that smoke that's on him is also getting into his lungs. And so therefore, obviously sounds like a chain smoker. So that's my only thing I could think why that would happen. So
that's funny.
But yeah,
that's
I love
a good
the 90s.
movie. Good pick.
Yeah, I love the 90s one too. So, but yeah, if anyone hasn't seen the 40s one, do yourself a favor. It's great.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah. What is your next pick?
Okay, so going into noir once again. And this, for the longest time, I've always said Double Indemnity was my favorite noir. Like, the more I think about it, this might have overtaken it by now. This is Nicholas Ray's They Live by Night, actually starring Farley Granger, who we just talked about from Rope, which is pretty funny. And Kathy O'Donnell is the female lead in this. And excuse me, this is a classic lovers on the run noir, which Gun Crazy actually is too, but this is a very different movie than Gun Crazy, because they're not interested in being Bonnie and Clyde. They're not interested in doing crime. He is an escapee from prison. So he just wants to live his life, and not go back to prison. Like, he doesn't want to do crime. But anyway, he's very, very young. He went to prison when he was a very young, like a young teenager, I think, for killing somebody. We never find out what happened. We just know he killed somebody. But he's on the run with this group of much older, very hardened criminals. And you immediately tell that, like, he's not like those guys. Like, there's this innocence about him. Anyway, he meets one of those older, hardened criminals' daughter while they're hiding up at his house, played by Kathy O'Donnell. And they just kind of very instantly fall for each other, but not in like a sort of like destiny, like this sort of over the top romantic thing. It's like they're both odd and they're both lonely, and they just sort of fall in together.
They attract to each other. Yeah.
They end up running away, and they get married. Even though like they don't tell each other "I love you" or anything. Like, they don't really rush the romance that much, but they get married because it's the convenient thing to do, kind of, so they can go on the run together. And this is an incredibly visceral movie in that, like, their relationship is so intense. And because there are moments that are just so beautiful in this movie. Like, the moment I think about so much from this movie is so simple. They're driving down the road, and Kathy O'Donnell just kind of snuggles up to Farley Granger and just says, "I like you so much." And it's just one of the most genuine young love moments I've ever seen in a movie. Because, like, it's not overwritten. It's not overly mushy. It doesn't sound like something that's smarter than a teenager would actually say. It's just, "I like you so much." And you don't hear that a lot in movies. So yeah, they have these really beautiful romantic moments, but also, I mean, they have intense, sad, and angry moments because they're under an enormous amount of stress because the cops are always after them. And so it's a very intense movie. It's another movie, like a lot of noirs, where the cops feel like this monstrous presence that will get you no matter what, and they're always looming over them. Very intense, very romantic, beautifully acted. Like, you know, I know certain actors from the 40s don't sound like we talk today, like Humphrey Bogart. As much as I adore him, nobody sounds like Humphrey Bogart today.
Or the Beast.
Or the Beast. But in this movie, the performances are very contemporary. Like, I think anybody could watch this movie and enjoy it, even if you don't like old movies. So yeah, that's Nicholas Ray's They Live by Night. It's maybe my favorite noir. I think it's the only noir film that's ever made me cry. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I have mine over there, and it's actually been like probably 3 years since I've seen it. So this is
okay.
Definitely, I think I was probably in a different mindset because I definitely think I would enjoy it just based on you talking about it, and maybe me paying more attention, because I don't think at that time I was super into noir. So
sure,
that's probably what it was about. But yeah, I'm excited for that, and that's a good pick. Excellent pick.
Thanks, man.
But now we're going to go back to screwball comedies and fast-paced dialogue. Well, we're not talking now about Preston Sturges. So we're going to go to 1941. And I actually just saw this really not that long ago, because this was just released not that long ago, or re-released, if you will. I'm talking about The Lady Eve right here with Barbara Stanwyck and Henry Fonda right here. Oh my goodness. Look at that iconic moment on that couch.
It's one of the best erection scenes in all of 1940s films.
Yeah, he's just like, what do I do? He just doesn't know what to do. And it's incredible. So yeah, so Jean, also the Lady Eve, who is Barbara Stanwyck, are these two characters. You see one of them halfway through the film. But you also have Charles, who is Hopsy, Henry Fonda's character, who just got out of the Amazon. He's, this hopeless virgin. And also he's just, just so used to specific, he's not used to being around ladies, is what I'm saying.
No.
And, you notice that from the offset when he's on this ship, because every woman is ogling him and wants to be around him. And honestly, Barbara Stanwyck's character, Jean, she's just making fun of everybody who's ogling him, and then somehow inadvertently gets involved with them. And then, hilarity ensues because it's incredibly farcical. But also her father, Colonel Harrington, plays by Charles Coburn, is also an incredible comedic force in this film. But like I said, this is an incredibly funny film. It's incredibly witty, very fast-paced. It's perverse, like we were just saying, longest erection, or best erection in a 19... I don't know. But
it's just very obvious that Henry Fonda has a boner, and
right, he can't move.
It's very funny.
Yeah. But so there's that. But like I said, there's very crazy, outlandish, like plot things that keep happening in the film, that you're just like, wait, what? Like half the time, but it's just done so genuinely like by all the characters, and it's totally believable at the same time as farcical as it. I don't know if I just said what I just said. It's very farcical, but it's also very realistic. And you could be in those situations and be like, is this actually happening right now? And it's just something that like I said, I just watched this. This is my second time watching it, and I adored it. And I definitely had to choose this when it comes to my choices for the 40s, because I'm like, this is just something that I love, and I know from now on I'm going to be watching this like over and over again. And I don't rewatch films too often because I have way too many films that I haven't seen. But this is definitely one that I'm like, if I'm feeling down and I want to just good laugh, I'll probably watch this movie. And this is definitely a highly rewatchable movie. And I definitely would say watch this movie if you get the chance. It's probably on the Criterion channel. And so if you need to access it through that, definitely do there, or buy the film itself, because it's incredible.
Yeah, I love that movie. It is, at least in the conversation, for my favorite screwball comedy. It's up there for me. I love Preston Sturges. I've been really going through his movies this year because the Criterion channel has a collection of a bunch of his movies. Yeah. And I think I only have one left. So I've watched them all except for one so far. And some are better than others. I don't love all of them, but they're all worth watching. And I think The Lady Eve is still my favorite. I'm a huge Barbara Stanwyck fan, just massive Barbara Stanwyck crush. And that's my favorite Barbara Stanwyck in that movie. Like, man, I just love her in that.
And she's two different people.
That's right. She is. I like con artist Barbara Stanwyck the best.
Yeah, she's incredible. So,
a great con artist movie.
Mm-hmm. I love, she's great. And I've seen her a lot of noirs, actually. That's where a lot of my Barbara Stanwyck that knowledge comes from. But yeah, I loved her in this one. So what about your last pick?
Okay. Kind of in the same general area as The Lady Eve. I don't think this is quite a screwball comedy, but it's in the neighborhood. This is the movie that like is maybe my favorite movie of the decade. Like, it's up with The Wolfman. It's very much up there. It is The Philadelphia Story, directed by George Cukor, starring Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and Jimmy Stewart. When I first saw this movie, I kind of felt like watching the Avengers for the first time, where it's like, oh my God, these three people all in one movie together. Like, this is amazing. Like, it felt like watching Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor all in a movie together or something. Mm-hmm. That might be over the top, but whatever. I kind of felt like that. So what this movie is about is Katharine Hepburn is getting married to a very boring guy, like a really boring guy. And he's not even likable, like, I'm making a mess. Like Ralph Bellamy in His Girl Friday. Like, mm-hmm. Ralph Bellamy is likable in that movie. This guy is not. He is just a sack. He's boring. But anyway, she's getting married to him, but her ex-husband, Cary Grant, shows up. And that's one thing that if you watch romantic comedies from the late 30s and the 1940s, there's a lot of divorce. And really the reason for that is because of censors. Movies were able to get away with a little bit more risque material if the characters at least used to be married. So there's a lot of divorce in comedies of this era. But anyway, he's her ex-husband. He shows up just to kind of make trouble. We're not quite sure why he's there. But also, Jimmy Stewart is a reporter who shows up to report on the event because Katharine Hepburn is a very rich and famous woman. And this is a rare romantic comedy where when I first saw it, I legitimately did not know how it was going to end. And that is so rare for this genre, because like, you don't watch romantic comedies to find out how it ends, you know, like you don't put on How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and be like, oh my God, are Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson going to end up together? Like, I got to watch it to the end to find out. That's not the case. But that is the case with this movie. I didn't know who was going to end up with who. I didn't know what was going to happen at the end. And, I do think the right ending happened. I do love the ending of this movie. I think it's perfect. But my favorite scene in this movie is when Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart are drunk in the backyard after a party. And I swear it's one of the sexiest scenes in cinema history. It's like George Cukor was like, okay, I want a sex scene here, but it's 1940. It's 1940, so I can't have a sex scene. So instead, I'm just going to have Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart talk, and I'm going to make it feel like a sex scene. And I think he pulled it off. Like, it's an amazing sequence. It feels like a tour de force of screenwriting, of acting, of everything. It's just brilliant. Everything about this movie is awesome. I love the Philadelphia Story. This is the movie that Jimmy Stewart won an Oscar for. And a lot of people say it was like an apology Oscar because he didn't win for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And I do agree he should have won for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but he is brilliant in this movie. So I'm not mad that he won the Oscar. Yeah, it's maybe my favorite movie of the 1940s. I love the Philadelphia Story.
That's an incredible movie. And I watched it for the first time 2 years ago, or maybe a year ago. So I need to rewatch it. And I know you said like, well, there could have been a sex scene here. So it competes with the erection scene with, and the Preston Sturges. So we want to have those sexy moments, I guess, in cinema in the 40s. Yeah. But, you know, we got to make sure it's, you know, a little bit friendly and also more perverse, and you got to have to use your imagination.
I don't think anyone's ever used the word perverse for the Philadelphia Story before.
No. It's more, yeah. But anyway, so that's an excellent pick, and I loved all those choices. But
Thanks,
now we're gonna have to go the animated route now, because I know we haven't went there yet. But I am choosing a film from 1940, and I've talked about this movie a million times, but it's that incredible, and I just rewatched it today. In fact, actually, I rewatched all the movies I just mentioned today, except for Gilda. I didn't have time to watch all 5. But I did just finish this, talking about Fantasia from 1940. This movie is just got such an incredible impression on me as a kid, mainly from Chernabog, the demon for the Night at Bald Mountain, the last part, which is why I'm so evil now. You know, this is why I'm so impressionable. But anyway, that was a terrible joke. But Chernabog is just an incredible piece, a part of this film. And like I said, it scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. Because this is one of those movies that's really experimental for Disney, which is really strange because this is early Disney too. And so you wouldn't probably see that family direction that they definitely steered towards quite a bit. They did some things in this movie that you probably would not see later on in Disney's history. But it's pretty interesting. But to kind of give everyone a little bit of this, if you haven't seen this, I mean, I'm sure you have. Hopefully you have. If you haven't, though, it's a really great journey. Deems Taylor is the conductor / narrator. So he is a conductor of this orchestra. And so what this is, it's a sight and sound film. It's literally just classical music pieces set to Disney designed animated things, right? And a lot of them really go from abstract kind of just things that like are just happening on the screen that you're like, what's going on? Almost like a pre-jazz type related thing, but with classical music. And then also there's one particular, like one of the most famous one, there's Mickey Mouse right there. And the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is kind of the middle part of the film, or at least the third piece of this, by Paul Dukas, who actually is based on a 1797 poem by Goethe. And so it's really strange how like they use that classic, like from 1797 all the way into this. But they used that piece, you know, like I said, but all the different types of pieces from these different incredible classic music composers. So like Bach, Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky, Beethoven, Ponchielli, Mussorgsky, and Schubert. I'm saying these names all like in succession, and I'm not breathing right now. So, but anyway, like I said, it's an incredible mixture of sight and sound. I just really love. I think this is one of the reasons that I fell in love with movies just to begin with. I remember, like I said, having that moment as a kid and just being enamored by what's going on the screen. And I also love music, and I'm sure a lot of people have probably picked up on that on the channel. And I don't talk about classical music much, but a lot of classical music is what influences the music that I listen to now. So a lot of the metal that I listen to, it's all based in classical music, and like a lot of the structure is. But I love music and the accompaniment to what I can see on the screen. It evokes a lot of emotion, and that emotion goes everywhere. And it also sparks creativity. This is a very creative film. And that's the other thing where, you know, I would go on to nowadays, like I'm enjoying the works of Ray Harryhausen, so stop motion animation. And I love anime as I was growing up watching Toonami. I really love watching that, or maybe even the Miyazaki films now. It all stems from stuff like this, and it's an incredible thing, and I could still put it on today and have a really, really great time with it. So Fantasia, need to check it out. Watch it on Disney Plus, but buy the movie too. So, but anyway, that's my spiel for Fantasia.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't seen that since I was a kid, so I do need to give it a rewatch and appreciate it as an adult and really, really take in what it's doing and why it's so important.
Yeah, and the movie, like I said, it's from 1940, so there's some controversies that would go on with this. So obviously this was during World War II. So some of the stuff like Night on Bald Mountain, which, the initial controversy there is like, okay, this is frightening for kids, right? So obviously, as a parent, if you were a parent, like, do I want to show this to my kid? At least the last act of the film itself, like that makes sense. But also because the World War II imagery, so like Nazis were really, the bad guy at the time. And a lot of this imagery kind of very much, I guess, like the Lion King would later on in some kind of way, kind of showcase like, okay, there's this evil menace that exists, and that like people correlate it with that during the time period, which is interesting and also like kind of scary to have that social realization, I suppose. Then the other thing too is actually there's they re-edited this for years later, which is a good thing, because there used to actually be a black centaur in this film polishing a white centaur's shoes. And so obviously during that time period, that was more okay. But obviously now, nowadays they censored that out, and for good reasons. So I'm glad that they changed that element. And then, so besides that, it's an incredible film. And I would say like everyone should definitely watch it. And if you love movies and you love music, the combination of the two is just incredible. So, but yeah, that's my choices for 1940.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Good picks.
Well, I'm so thankful that Daniel was able to join me on this incredible journey through the 1940s. I had a great time. What about you, man?
Oh, me too. We talked about a bunch of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah, I love these movies. Hope people check them out if they haven't seen them.
Yep. I hope people can find them on the streaming services, or, pick them up for purchase if you can. But Daniel, where can everybody find you?
So you can find my podcast, which is called the Cobwebs Podcast, where we talk about classic film, like pre-1970s movies, the kind of stuff that we're talking about today. And basically, I just have a guest on for every episode, and we talk about old movies that they love. And it's really, really fun. You can find it on all the podcast apps, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, anywhere you find podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Epler Daniel. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Cobwebs Pod. And you can follow me personally on Letterboxd. I'm just at Daniel Epler. So I'm pretty easy to find all the places by typing in Daniel Epler or Cobwebs. And if you haven't heard the podcast, hope you'll come join us. We've got an episode coming out soon on Tennessee Williams Gothic melodramas. Got a Westerns episode in the pipeline. You can hear Nathan on a previous episode. We talked about samurai movies. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff on there.
I can guess who those guests are for those two, for the Tennessee Williams one, and then also for the Westerns one. But I'll keep my mouth shut for the surprise. I would assume that's who it might be, but I don't know. But anyway, what about YouTube? You also have a YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit on hiatus right now just because I've been so busy. I've not had time to deal with it, but it's Cobwebs, Dusting Off Classic Cinema. That's the full title on YouTube. And we talk about Blu-rays, and I basically do what I did right here, except I don't talk to anybody. I talk to a camera. So you can check that out if you want to.
Yeah, so I know you're going to be back there, not in the next upcoming month because there's something going on, but I might be. It might be. Okay. Well, I'm going to put all those links down in the description, and follow Daniel on all those different platforms. He is a joy as a friend, and I'm glad that I know him in real life too. And so, I hope everyone can follow his work and listen to his podcast, follow him on YouTube and other social media outlets. I'll leave those in the description down below. But yeah, once again, thank you, Daniel, for coming on. I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation. Tell us what your favorite 1940s films are. Is there anything that we didn't talk about? And
Citizen Kane.
We didn't talk about Casablanca. Oh, we did talk about Casablanca, but we didn't talk about Citizen Kane or It's a Wonderful Life, right? We kind of, cut out some of the things that are a little bit more known. But yeah, let us know what you would pick for the 1940s down in the comment section down below. But thank you all so much for watching this video. Give us a like, share, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.